Hi, I'm John Paul Raj, and I'm on a mission to make the learning of math fun. So if you're new to this channel, please do consider subscribing. On this video, we're going to talk about the algebra of factoring quadratic expressions. Now, we've done some videos in the past. I'm going to link those videos in the description box below, where we can just write down the factors of the quadratic expressions without showing any algebraic work. There's a place and time for those kind of methods, especially in competitive exams where you do not have to show all the working. But in your school exams, when your teacher requires you to show all the working, this is what's going to help you. Let's start. The general form or the standard form for a quadratic expression is ax squared plus bx plus a c. This is a quadratic expression, not a quadratic equation. For an equation, you like equal to 0, just like they've mentioned in these questions here. And although these questions are all quadratic equations, not quadratic expressions, in this particular video, we're just talking about factoring quadratic expressions and how to use those factors to solve those quadratic equations. We'll see that in some other video. This video is just showing you the algebraic process behind factoring quadratic expressions. Clear? All right. Now, the whole point of factoring is to find two special numbers. What are those two special numbers? Well, first we need to multiply a and c. All right. So first you need to find the product ac and then identify factors of ac. Factors of AC. Those are the two special numbers. Now, what's so special about them? First of all, they have the product. Okay, factors means they're the product, right? So their product would be A times C. So you're going to identify two special factors. There might be more than one combination, but you got to actually find out a pair of numbers, those factors, whose product is going to be A and C, and whose sum, the sum, okay, would be equal to B with the correct sign. So basic idea, the basic challenge, the basic purpose, or the basic secret, or the basic essence, whatever word you choose to use in the method of factoring quadratic expressions, is to find these two special numbers, which are actually factors of AC. Okay, so first you need to multiply AC. Factors of AC, their product is going to be AC because they're factors of AC, and their sum will be B with the correct sign. Okay, that is going to be the big task. So let's see with an example how this goes, and we'll also show the algebraic steps, what would be expected in your schools. All right, so we've done examples in the previous videos where we can just write down the factors, but like I said before, there's a time and place for those methods. But in the school, I think you need to show all your algebraic working, because that would be expected, and then and only then will you get all the marks. So those methods, it's not that that's wrong or something like that. There's a time and place for those kind of methods in competitive exams, but in your school test and for your school purposes, please try and follow this method. Okay, let's take this example number 26. Okay, so you got 6x squared plus 17x minus 3. As I said, I'm just looking at the quadratic expression, not the quadratic equation. We're just looking at the factoring part of it in this video. All right, so I'm going to do my rough work here on the right hand side. Let's identify A, B, and C. A is 6. B is 17 and C is find negative 3. And remember, the first thing to do was to find out AC. A times C happens to be negative 18. And our goal is to find factors of negative 18 that will add up to 17. Okay. Now, there are different possibilities, right? You have 3 and 6, well, with the correct signs. Okay. Plus 6 minus 3 plus 3 minus 6. And then 2 times a minus 9 and minus 2 times a 9. But the one that is going to work is going to be a positive 18 and a negative 1. All right, because why is it going to work? Well, remember what I said, it should add up to this, because you have a positive 17 here, and you know that positive 18 and this is positive. Okay, I hope you can see that. Let me use another color. Positive 18 and a negative 1 actually add up to or sum up to 17, and those factors, positive 18 times a negative 1, also gives you negative 18. So that's the combination you got to choose. Okay, and that will work. Well, this is just the first step. Now you got to put it together here. What we're doing is we are going to replace this 17x by this particular combination that you've chosen. All right, you can see all this thing. Here you go. All right, make sure that you guys can see all this working. Okay, there you go. Now it's better. All right, now you got to replace 17, that 17x by 18 and that negative 1, the combination, the right combination that works. So you're going to write it as equal to 6x squared plus 18x minus, I'm going to write, okay, let me write it as x, okay, minus 3. Because, you know, sometimes students get caught up in that thing. I was just going to say something, but I just hold on to that thought. Now, what we do after this, we are going to factor two terms at a time. Two terms at a time. What is the highest common factor for 6x squared and 18x? Well, 6x happens to be the highest common factor for those two terms. Okay, two terms at a time. 6x. And so you factor two at a time, put a bracket. 6x times x would give me 6x squared, the first term. And 6x, there's a plus sign here, plus 6x times a 3 would give me 18x. So be careful, all right? Go slow because you have to show your working and you need to be correct, okay? So 6x times an x is going to give you 6x squared. 6x times a 3 would give you that 18x. Now, the same thing has to be done for the second term. And when you look at it, you see, okay, there's x and 3, and there doesn't seem to be anything that's common. And that's why, I was hesitant whether to give it away or not. There's always that 1. There's always that 1 that's, somehow secretly hiding, lurking somewhere there. It's actually that x can be, perceived as negative 1 times x. And even that 3, that negative 3 can be perceived as negative 1 times a 3. So 1 is that secret, hiding, invisible, important number there. So you can pull out that negative 1. What did I just do? All right, negative 1 times. And then you can write it as x. So negative 1 times x is going to give you that negative x. Negative 1 plus a 3. Careful on that. Negative 1 plus a 3 is going to give you a negative 3. Okay. So another way to also look at it is whatever you get here, okay, whatever sign you get x plus 3, you get the same bracket here if you're doing it correctly. So in case you happen to mess up on the signs, just look for that. Okay, that's a secret tip. Okay, so the same sign you should get, otherwise you're doing something incorrect. Now let's continue. Again, we factored these two terms now. This is my first term, this is my second term. So two terms at a time, all right? So between these two terms, what do we have in the first term? We have got 6x times an x plus 3. In the next term, you got negative 1 times an x plus 3. So the common factor is that x plus 3, right? X plus 3 in those two terms. So we bring that x plus 3 as the common factor. And in the next bracket, we write down what's uncommon. So from the first term, we had x plus 3 times a 6x. So that 6x comes here. That's the first term, okay? So from the first term, you got a 6x down here. That was 6x plus times that x plus 3. From the second term, x plus 3 was pulled out. What's remaining? Just that negative 1. There you go. So the factors, that's your complete answer. The factors are x plus 3 times a 6x minus 1. This is just factoring, by the way. This is not solving. So if you were to factor, this is the kind of working that will give you your marks. Your teacher will be happy. But let's go with the method once again. I have to show you the whole thing, right? Make sure that this is zoomed out. Hope you guys can see. That's our question. We started with this question. 6x squared plus 17x minus 3. Identify A, B, and C correctly. All right. The first thing is to find out A times C. A times C with the correct sign. Okay. So A times C, if it's negative, write it as negative. Then you have to find out the factors of that A times C, negative 8 in this case, that will add up to B. B is 17 in our case. So we saw that, that's 3 times 6, that's 9 times 2, all with the different signs. It will still not add up to positive 17. The one combination that works is positive 18 and negative 1. It would not have worked even if you had written it as negative 18 times a 1. Even that would not work because negative 18 plus 1 would give you negative 17. So you got to use the correct combination with the correct signs, which will give you B with the correct sign. Okay. So we chose positive 18 and negative 1. That's just the first part. Then you got to write this 17 as positive 18x minus 1x. Now this is what sometimes some classes, some textbooks, some teachers will refer to as splitting the middle term. All right. This is what's actually going on in splitting the middle term. Basically, you're trying to find the factors of AC that sum up to the middle term. That's the basic idea of the splitting the middle term. What happens next? Well, then you group the two terms at a time. Okay. Group two terms at a time to factor two terms at a time. So from 6x squared and 18x, the highest common factor was 6x. Be careful in this step. This is probably one of the most important. Okay, the others are also important, but this is probably one of the most important. This is where things can go wrong in your factors or in your factoring process. So the highest common factor between the first two terms is 6x. So we pull that out, and then in a bracket, we write down what's uncommon. So 6x times an x gives you that 6x squared, and then plus sign, make sure that that sign is there. 6x times a 3 gives you 18x. Be careful on that, all right? Now the next one, okay? There was just negative x and negative 3. And I said 1 is that invisible important member there. So you can bring out that negative 1 as the common factor. Okay, so it might seem deceiving, but here's the tip. What bracket you get here, the same term should come with the same sign. Okay, so negative 1 times x plus 3. Negative 1 times x gives you negative x. Negative 1 times a plus 3 gives you a negative 3. Hope that is clear. Then comes an equally important step. Well, actually, every step is important, okay? Now, from these two terms, these are the two terms. What's common to them? X plus 3, that bracket that was just formed is common. So you bring that bracket aside first. That's the bracket. You bring that aside first, okay? That was the common thing. This color is not coming, okay? That's my common factor. And the next factor would contain terms that are uncommon, okay? So from the first term, you got 6x, and that -1 comes in here, so that the two factors of the quadratic expression 6x squared plus 17x minus 3 will be that x plus 3 times 6x minus 1. You can even multiply these two brackets to check whether you've got the right factors. Okay, let's do one more question based on the same steps. Okay, let's do this number 30 that's given here. I'm going to put a line here so that it demarcates. Can you guys see? I'm just going to copy this question down. 20x squared minus 7x minus 3. Okay, this is just quadratic expressions, not quadratic equations that we are trying to do. Again, let's put a line. Okay, let's identify our A, B, and C. A is 20, B is -7, and C is a -3. The first thing, as we have seen before, find out the product AC. All right, so A times C will be 20 times a -3. That is a -60. Now, the game is what? The objective of the game is to find factors of -60 that will add up to -7. Well, 60, you can have 2 times 30, 2 times -30 or -2 times 30. Well, that will not add up to -3. Put it down and see, okay? I mean, if you're not comfortable, you can just put it down, okay? -30 times 2. Well, that's not going to add up to, because you need those two numbers that add up to. What I mean by that is -30 plus a 2. Well, that's not going to give you a -7. Neither will -2 plus a 30. Even that's not going to give you. So these factors will not work. Right? What are the other factors? Well, 60 can also be 5 times 12, right? 5 times 12 with what combination? So 5 times 12, those are two factors, but with a -12 and plus 5, that will add up to a -7. You see that? Okay, so that's the combination you should look for, and with those correct signs. So what are we looking for? We are going to look at a -12 times a 5. Those are factors of AC, and that sum up to -7 with the combination -12 plus a 5. Now, this is all rough work, okay? If your teacher likes all the rough work, show it to her, she'll be impressed, okay? So now what do we do? This is just the first part. Now, what do we do? This is where we have to express -7, the B, the -7, as -12 plus 5. And that's what's referred to as splitting the middle term, okay? So let's do that quickly. So what we're going to do is that we write 20x squared, -7x, I'm going to write it as -12x plus a 5x, okay? So you might wonder, where did that come from? Where did that come from? Some students ask. Well, that's actually in the rough work. Remember that again, okay? So here we go. That -7 was written as, or is written as, -12 plus a 5, and that's what we refer to as splitting the middle term. And then let's continue the question. The next one, like I said, equally important, 2 terms at a time. Factor 2 terms at a time. Well, in this case, we can't see the common factors, but if you shuffle the terms, we may, okay? So we are going to rearrange, not shuffle, rearrange the terms in a way that we can get common terms. So what I'm going to do now is 20x squared. I'm going to write that 5x, and then I'm going to write the 12x and -3, okay? Can you see what I've done? I've just rearranged the terms, okay? Because then I can get a common term here and a common factor here, okay? Common factor, and the idea is to factor 2 terms at a time. Oops, that just erased. 2 terms at a time. The first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So in case you run into this kind of an issue, it's okay. Rearrange the terms and then you'll be able to find the common factors, okay? So there we go. The highest common factor between 20x squared and 5x happens to be 5x. Then put the bracket. So 5x times what should give you 20x squared? 5x times 4x will give you 20x squared. 5x times what will give you 5x? 5x times 1. Remember, it should be +1, okay? 5x times +1 will give you 5x. That's done. Next term, next 2 terms. You have a -12x and a -3. Well, what's the highest common factor? You can write down -3 outside, okay? -3 times what gives you -12? Well, -12x, it should be a +4x, okay? -3 times a +4x will give you a -12x. -3 times what gives you -3? Well, it should be +1. And as I said before in that example, if you're doing things correctly, it should be the same term, that same bracket will repeat itself. Okay, so that's the same term that's coming. Can you see that 4x plus 1 comes again as it is? 4x plus 1 here, 4x plus 1 here. Can you see that? And now what do we do? Now we factor these 2 as terms. This is one term, this is the other term. That bracket is going to be the common factor, obviously. So you can write that thing down as 4x plus 1 as that first bracket. And what's remaining comes into the second bracket, 5x minus 3. And that is how you factor. And those should be that should be the correct factors. Okay, you can even check the multiplication. See, 5x times 4x will give you 20x square. 5x and a negative 4x will give you. Wait a minute. What is this? 5x times a negative 12x will give you a negative 7x. That's correct. And then that's a negative 3. Cool. This is how you factor trinomials or quadratic polynomials. Let's just take one where the value of a is equal to 1. Which one shall I take? Okay, let me take this one. X square minus 4x minus 5. X square minus 4x minus 5. This example. Can you see that? Let me write it down here on the right hand side. So I have x square minus 4x. And was that a minus 5? Let me just quickly check that. Yeah. X square minus 4x minus 5. The difference here between this and the earlier two questions is that the value of a is 1. Typically in your school, you would have learned this separately or this first and that next. But it's the same technique, okay? It's the same technique. I'll just show you quickly how. The value of b is a negative 4 and the value of c is a negative 5. Right? Now, what did I say? First, find a times c. Okay? A times c. Well, a is 1. So whether you take a times c or just c by itself, the same thing. So a times c is going to be a negative 5. All right? Again, it's the same thing, right? And you see, because this is 1, and I said that's that invisible number, sometimes in the textbooks, when you have a question where the value of a is 1, remember a is the coefficient of x squared, they just tell you, find the factors of c. Well, actually, it's a times c because a is 1, and it's just ignoring that 1 because, like I said, it's invisible but important, all right? So a times c is negative 5, and then the same process as you had done before. Find factors of a times c or c, remember, a is 1, which add up to, sum up to negative 4. So negative 5 times a 1 gives you negative 5, and they also sum, right? So negative 5 plus a 1 would give you a negative 4. That is our value of b, right? So that is negative 5 plus a 1. Can you see this? I hope you can see this. Can you go? Oh, there you go. You can see everything? All right. So the factors of c or a times c, all right, a is equal to 1 is negative 5 times 1, and that is what we've chosen. If you've chosen the other way around, if you've chosen 1 times a negative 5, you'd not get the right combination. Okay, so be careful of the right combination. And then we have to use that word called splitting the middle term, which means you're writing this b, the middle term, as with this combination, that correct combination, negative 5 plus 1. Okay, so let's do that. X squared minus, this time I know where it's going. Okay, so I'll write it as negative 5x plus 1x and minus 5. Okay, can you see what I've done? So the negative 5x plus 1, that's the splitting of the middle term. All right, now what's common? What's common? What do? We take two terms at a time, the first two and the last two. All right, so here we go. What's common? Well, it's only x. X times x gives you x squared, and then x times a negative 5 will give you a negative 5x. What about this one? Again, there's that, remember that secret, almost like a secret agent, that one invisible thing. Okay, so it's 1 times x and 1 times 5, all right? So you can write plus 1 and in the bracket x minus 5. And remember that tip I gave you. Same term will appear. And then you take the factors of these two terms. That bracket will be the common factor. So you bring that bracket that you just came up with. That will be the common factor. That's x minus 5. And the remaining terms, there's x here. Do not forget that plus 1. Okay, that 1 always appears as that secret agent. Okay, almost like a 001 in this case. Okay, so that is how you show all your algebraic reasoning, all your working while factoring quadratic expressions. I'm going to see you all in the next video.